I want to talk about how to measure a string. So it's really, really common that a string breaks, or maybe a bass string was installed improperly, and so we need to duplicate it, or maybe there was just one missing. So measuring a string is very doable. It's not too bad at all. So we're actually going to be rebuilding this piano. So I'll just take a string off that we can use as our practice string. We'll just have to remember to put the string kind of in place so that we know when we have the whole set duplicated, we'll put it in its spot. I'm not sure yet. We might. Maybe I can wobble it out of there? I don't know. Okay, so like 95% plus, the break is up here if it's a break, 98, 99 even. Only 1 to 5%, it's going to happen back there, back at the loop. Generally, if a string breaks at the pin, and of the majority of the breaks that are here, it's, I don't know, probably 50-50. Sometimes it breaks the A graph. Sometimes it breaks at the tuning pin. If it breaks the tuning pin, you can tie it. There's a knot that I actually have another video of that I did like, 10 years ago, something like that, about how to tie a bass string. I guess we can do that again if people want to, but I did that a long time ago. So what I didn't talk about is how to measure it. So there are 4 dimensions, and actually in a minute we'll also talk about how to measure the bass string if it's missing, how to get the approximate if you don't have like the book that gives, or maybe it's a non-standard piano, or maybe it's just, frankly it's just as easy to kind of determine what it is. Okay, so 4 dimensions, super easy. We need the inner diameter, meaning the diameter of the core, the steel wire. The outer diameter, this is actually a double wound string. You can see the 2 wraps right there. So inner diameter, outer diameter, length of the hitch pin to the beginning of the winding, and then length of the winding. So, and I guess this is probably where I've talked in previous trainings about how my mind is very much like focused on thousandths of an inch, like that's the measurement that I think of. I think that's where this comes from, because like from the beginning of my career in piano technology, I've been doing bass strings, and that just kind of got my mind stuck on thousandths of an inch. So, and the supply house that I use, Schaff, which I think is great. I love Schaff. They only take thousandths of an inch. So make sure it's zeroed, right? You hold it like this with your thumb on the wheel. Okay. And if it's not zeroed, you can turn that dial so it is, right? You don't have to squeeze it too hard. That one, remember that it's going to change your reading if you're not totally perpendicular to the string. So this one is measuring at 49 thousandths. Okay, on the inner diameter. Outer diameter, same thing. I'm not going to squeeze. I'm just going to kind of go to it, touch it till it touches. This is not 170, or sorry, this is not 72 thousandths. It's 172 thousandths. Don't forget, that's a very important distinction, right? Remember that every revolution is 100 thousandths. Okay, so this has gone 1 revolution and then up to 70, so it's 172. Okay, then, and I'm always double checking because it's just a hassle to have to reorder. If you use a tape measure like this, remember that they intentionally have that little, what is that called? I don't know. It's, yeah, the little play. They're engineered so that when that's pulled tight, it's a full inch right there. When it's loose, it's like, I don't know what that is. It might be 1/8 of an inch, something like that, of play. So that's intentional. So make sure that that play is removed. So I'm going to put it up against the beginning of the winding there. I'm going to call that, I go to the inside of the little loop there. And you could say 5 1/16. Either one would work. Probably 5 inches or 5 1/16 would probably work. Can everybody see where that lines up? And I'm making sure that my coil is nice and tight against the thing. Can you see that? So it's 5 1/16. And I measure them, always measure them as I go. Or sorry, yeah, I write them down as I go. And for this, same thing. And make sure it's this little lost motion thing on the tape measure is locked. And for that, I'll say 45.5. And then I'll do that again. I'll measure it again, and maybe even a third. Like if I get the same measurement second time, I'll go with that. If I get a different measurement, then I'll go a third time. Okay. Okay.
See again where you measure to on the loop.
On the loop.
Yeah.
So it's the beginning of the winding to the, like, I don't know if it's even what Schaff wants, but it's what I've always done for years, and it seems to work. I go to the inside of the, so it's the hitch pin to the winding. Okay. Okay. So is like what they say. So it's like the inside of the loop would be the hitch pin. Yeah. Okay. I guess that's why I do it. I don't know. Okay. So it's those four dimensions, and then we'll custom make it for you. Okay, then I'll just mention this briefly. If a string is missing, I actually change my measuring a little bit. I'll measure the as far as dimensions, you can get the inner and outer diameters pretty easily just by measuring the neighbors and kind of seeing you know if it's not obvious right away. Maybe you could kind of check a few of them, kind of see what the pattern is, check a few on the other side, see what the pattern is. And so if they're, you know, if the outer diameters are like, I don't know, for the sake of simplicity, you know, 210, 200, 190, 180, then we know that this is 170. I mean, for the sake of simplicity, same thing coming from the other direction. Okay, so it's the length that is a little bit more tricky to come up with, because it's really tempting to just measure exactly what the open space is, kind of compare the neighbor and measure the overall length of the winding. But I actually subtract a 1/4 inch from it. Just in my experience, when I go exactly to like where it, you know, it seems like, because usually there's a pattern. It's the same on the back. We have this closed, but I mean, it's the same thing. There's basically a line, right, where all of the windings end. Same on the back. There's basically a line. Yeah, there you go. There's basically a pattern. It's not exact, but it's pretty good. And so you can pretty well estimate where the beginning of the winding should be, and then you can estimate where the end of the winding should be. My experience is when I do that, and my theory is, because it's stretching, it ends up being too long when it's put under tension. So I think the right dimension to subtract is about 1/4 inch for the overall length of the winding. Then from the hitch pin to the beginning of the winding, I subtract 1/8 inch, because that seems to stretch slightly too. I mean, it's much less that has to stretch, but there's also like the loop that maybe, you know, kind of like compresses a little bit once it's under 160 pounds or whatever of tension. You know, things just kind of change dimension. So, and worst case scenario, if you don't do that, what you'll see is you'll be rather than being within the pattern, it'll start a little bit late, a little bit in, and it'll end also way closer to the A graph. Okay, and sometimes if it's really bad, the winding will actually touch the A graph, which is I mean, it's already way incorrect if it's even close to the A graph. But anyway, it's happened.
You also indicate the double wound copper.
Yeah, you can. Usually they know that if it's above a certain dimension, that it'll be double wound. But yeah, it's a good idea.
So you don't need to actually measure both
No.
diameters?
No, just the overall diameter and the steel diameter. Okay, so it's pretty simple.
So when you measure for a new set, do they calculate the stretch in there?
So what they do on a new set is we actually have it too. They have a book. They probably have a more complete book. I think they have, they have like decades of string duplication, and they have records, and things were pretty standardized by like 1880, and including scaling designs. And I think what they do is they lay it out, and if it fits one of the patterns that they have, that is a regular pattern for, say, a Kanabi from the 1930s, they'll know, okay, this pattern from the Kanabi has 42 bass strings, and here's the pattern, and they just duplicate that. If they are just duplicating, I think they have like something where they lay them all out, so it makes measuring more easier. The other
method of laying the bass strings is you put butcher paper,
mm-hmm.
and you can punch them out.
Yeah,
and
okay.
the hitch pins.
You want me to talk about that?
I don't care.
So there's all right. Well, I will. There's there's a guy named Jim Arledge that is a bass string maker. He's just he's not a company he's not a piano supply house. Like, he just does bass strings. There's a few of those. There's a guy, Gregor or something, in Germany. I can't remember his last name. He makes really, really nice bass strings. Mapes is a bigger company. Anyway, so the way this guy Jim Arledge does it is you put butcher paper on here, and use a crayon or whatever, or you can use carbon paper and just kind of rub it, get a rubbing in there. So, and it's just this section here, and then the bass, and then they want, I think it's just 2 dimensions. It's what is it? Like from the A graph, the center of the A graph, to the center of the speaking length bridge pin on the very bottom and then the very top of the section, and then they'd want the same thing here, where you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes that are in the tenor, that are bass strings. So that way, you wouldn't have to send in, you know, like how we make a wreath of bass strings. Only it's not just one bass string; it's all, you know, 40 or 42 bass strings. If we did that, we wouldn't have to send all of those bass strings in, but we just have to send in those rubbings, and then just take 4 measurements: the length there, there, and there, and then Jim, he lays it all out, I guess, and I think he might even do some rescaling. Like he's super passionate about bass strings, and by rescaling, I mean he doesn't just duplicate what was there, or he doesn't just go with whatever was used historically. He'll actually re-engineer it through some mathematical formulas, and I'm not familiar with those formulas at all. I actually did. There is a formula. It's much simpler for we did this a few years ago. Do you remember? Were you here when we did this?
I don't know.
For the tenor string or for the treble strings, all the steel. It was a piano that didn't have any of the piano wire that we could duplicate. So we had to like re-engineer, and I do have a formula for that. And so we just plugged the formula in a spreadsheet, and based on the lengths, and then based on how many pounds of tension you want, it spits out the ideal diameter of piano wire for each. It's a pretty cool program. I think I first used that program like 15 years ago, and then I played with it then, and then just kind of forgot about it because it's just so easy to, you know, just duplicate what was there, and it seems to work really well. And then we came across this piano that didn't have those strings on it originally, and so we had to pull that old formula out, and it worked great. The piano sounded great. Anyway, but there's the same kind of formula for bass strings that I think it's quite a bit more complex. But anyway, any other questions? Okay, there it is. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.